thanks for joining us, Steve Goodwin and the head of VIP, Steve Wood, today. We spoke, I think November time, and quite a lot of people were very interested in what you both said. We just wanted to get a follow-up. I'll start with our guest, Steve Goodwin. I'll keep going back, and I must repeat this every week to someone in boxing. You were the first person to tell me last March we'd be out of action for at least a year. Where are you looking now, Steve, while you get your cup of tea there?
That's Olivia's doing her job.
Olivia can't work anymore, can they, beauticians? So, where are we now, Steve? In the sense that we're looking, when can it come back? And I follow music quite closely, and they're looking at outdoor festivals August at the earliest. So, my honest boxing, where particularly guys like you who depend on 1,200 people packing your call on a Saturday.
I feel now that the earliest realistic possibility is September.
Really?
The earliest realistic possibility. We have temporary shows booked in, because I think what Steve said last time, you've got to make provisions in case you can run, but we're not doing anything. We're not putting any fights on, but we've got dates booked for early June, but I think that is remote now. So I think that realistically, September is the earliest viable possibility. But what I would stress here is the reason that I said March is I was working on the time that it would take to develop medical vaccines. And I was aware of the AstraZeneca situation back in March 2020. So I was ahead of the game in knowing realistically when a vaccine would get approved. But the problem that we have, it's not just the fact that we got a vaccine approved. We have an inept and incompetent government who have basically messed up everything, and everything that should be happening. In other words, we should be at a lower rate of deaths and hospitalizations than we are, and we should be in a position to roll out the vaccine quicker. Now, I know for a fact that this vaccine was okay to go end of September, and they were already producing. So when we're told that only 500,000 doses are ready for distribution at the start of January, you have to question why this is the case and what's politically going on. Now, the reason I mention all of this is our views, and mine and Steve's views, on when boxing is going to be back. It's fairly irrelevant, really, because it's totally and utterly governed by the speed of the vaccinations, by the speed of the government in getting everybody out there. And then when we are vaccinated, then it comes down to the boxing board as to when they will turn around and say, now is the time when we can allow people to have their own free choice and allow to attend events. Because we live with, I know this is a smaller thing, and this is not the flu, this is much more serious, but we live with the flu, and we accept there's going to be 10,000 deaths a year with the flu, and we live with that, and we carry on with that. We're going to have to live with COVID in the same way, that we're going to accept there's going to be 10,000 deaths, 15,000 deaths a year, and it's going to be norm for us. But everybody has to accept that, the government, the people, and the boxing board as well, to allow us to get on with our businesses and get the boxers' shows on the road. And there will be a point upon which the bodies are higher than us turn around and say, we're going to accept that now. The risk is now acceptable. We will allow things to return to normal. But that is outside my control and outside Steve's control. It's relevant to when the vaccinations are done, how effective they are. And based on what we've seen so far with the government, you can't have too much faith.
Yeah. Steve, with yourself, as Steve said, it's irrelevant when you think, you both think you can have shows. There's a lot of people to decide. Are you still planning on May? So I know you were looking at putting your Jolly Boys dinner shows on in May, or are you now?
Well,
as I say, as I go back to that music thing, if there's no outdoor festivals, you can't have indoor sport.
Well, that might be a choice of the people who are doing the outdoor festivals. I think we're in a position that till we're given the green light, we can't do anything. And really and truthfully, we need 6 weeks minimum to put a show together. So, I'm sat here thinking, well, maybe May could happen, and it'd be dinner shows like last year. We was thinking we might be able to get little dinner shows away in December or January, and we couldn't. It'd probably be likely that we can't again. But I'm sat there with a hope that maybe we can do smaller dinner shows around April or May. Dependent, like Steve said, everything's changed now, particularly with the vaccination being out, and if they can roll it out quicker than anticipated. They're talking about a lot of people getting them in January, the second people wave getting them in February, and then a third lot of people in March. So I think by then the older and the clinically vulnerable should have all have them. So whether or not they turn around and say you can have them shows now, the younger people just be a little bit careful. I don't know. It might be that you can't do it till everyone's had the vaccine. If that's the case, I think Steve would be even optimistic with September.
I agree. And the bottom line with it is you've got two hurdles to overcome. You've got to overcome the government, because what you've got to remember is they've got a 3-month window now to vaccinate everybody, because the next 3 months are going to be the first 3 months people having their second dose. So whatever they do in the next 3 months is going to be what we're living with in 6 months' time, which we're going to be living in at the beginning of July. So if, for example, they haven't got through to all the over 50s and everybody else that's got an illness, if they haven't done all of that within 3 months, then you're then talking about the boxing board probably won't allow us to have a free-for-all without COVID testing and everything like that. And you've got to get the boxing board to release their restrictions as well. So there needs to be a combination of both things working together. So you could get the government getting so far down the line, but the boxing board still saying, "Oh no, we're not happy with indoor events," just as you say with the outdoor festivals. But then you've got the problem is that you're going to carry on. You've got the theatres in London that could really go down the pan if they don't get open at some point. So there's a hell of a lot of issues. But you could see theatres opening in London, but boxing shows still cancelled. Because to me, what will probably happen is those events that make the most money will be allowed to take the chances first. And small hall boxing may be that, we get a lot tougher restriction than other people because there's not the funds of money in it. But theatres in London may be allowed to stage shows ahead of us. So there's a hell of a lot of political football to be played and a hell of a lot of seeing what the government do. And then you've then still got at the end of that, when will the board feel comfortable in releasing us to do small hall shows at capacity? Because I don't think they're going to, the board tend to be more reserved than most. So I can't imagine them allowing us until everything is 100% or in their eyes is virtually zero risk. Because I can see them, from the boxing board's perspective, they make their money out of the big promoters, not the small promoters. And there is no doubt, I've got no issues with the board, but there is no doubt that their main thing and their main business is a private limited company is centered around Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn. That's where most of their money comes from. And then the license holders pay their fees. So you've got that as well. So, I'm realistic, but, I've got shows booked in early June. I can't see it, but they're booked. September to me now looks to be the earliest realistic time we can look at. And as Steve says, we've got to be able, if we're going in September, to be able to market from July.
That's going to be hard. I don't want to be negative. You need to be as positive as you can. But if you say you've got to market from July, if restrictions have been lifted by, say, July, how do you market in August? Because if there are restrictions lifted, Britons are going to go on the rampage in Spain and Greece for 8 August and not think of buying a boxing ticket. And
I think, Steve, I think people will flock to go back to live sport. There's so many people that are desperate for live sports. I think, yes, we'll all go on holiday, that's for sure. But I still think people will want to go back to live sport. But it's whether we can actually market, whether we know for sure in July we can market. I mean, the boxing board at the moment, and I think they've made the right decision, by the way, to shut boxing down for January. But they've told them that they will review end of January to see whether shows can go ahead in February. Well, even for big promoters, that's no use to them because they can't be told on the 31st you can stage one next week. It takes planning. So indirectly, by doing that and not being able to say we're going to release it until the end of January, that's most of February done for the big promoters.
Yeah, I know one of them's waiting end of February is their fingers crossed for, but you know, again, it could be more marked. How do you feel, Steve Wood, how the board have handled it the last week? Do you appreciate the tricky situation that they seem to be in?
Listen, I appreciate the tricky situation that they're in, but I disagree with Steve that they've made the right decision. I think it's not a fair decision. And if you look at the number of shows, I think there's only 2 that I know of that was happening in January. So if you talk about the medical effect that it'd have on the NHS, that it's minimal, especially when you compare it that football's still going on and they'll have like some weekends they'll have 20 matches on a Saturday and say 10 on a Sunday, and the number of football games that are going on, they won't let 2 boxing shows go on for the professional boxing. It seems crazy, and as I say, it's not just the fighters who've kind of spent all Christmas. You know, I mean, if he's going to do it before. Let them know. And I mean, they've spent, should we say, all Christmas training and dieting and for nothing, and they still don't know when it's going to be rescheduled. And then you look at the promoters, you know, they're lucky enough from Sky and BT to be giving them dates what they can work on, and then all of a sudden they're letting the production companies and the TV companies all down, and like then they need new dates which you don't know is going to go on. It's like, will Sky and BT turn around and say boxing's already a pain in the arse, he's getting too big of a pain in the arse, let's not give him any dates, you know? So I think for the sake of only 2 shows, to pull January was a bad decision.
I just want to come back on that a bit. Just the difference between football and boxing is there are issues that the hospitals are being overrun, right? So the hospitals are going to be in real trouble in 2 or 3 weeks' time. And probably at the end of January, you're going to have situations where they're going to have to turn people away from hospitals who have got COVID. They're going to have to choose who or who not to look after. Now, realistically, there were lots of football played, lots of boxing played. Normally, in a football match, somebody's going to bust their arm, break a leg, do their ligaments, have an injury. But in boxing, you can have bleeds on the brain, emergency surgery needed. And the injuries to boxers can be much more severe, or are likely to be much more severe than they would be in football. The issue is here, to me, that if you've got a boxer with a bleed on the brain and hospitals overrun, you can't literally, for the sake of sport, send somebody into hospital who's got a brain injury where there are absolutely no beds, and people could be getting turned away at the door because of the ineptitude of the government in letting this run out of control. So I actually see why they've done it. I agree that it would be nice if they didn't do it, but I can actually understand why they've done it. And I felt in November this was going to happen. I felt in November they were going to cancel January, because it's bad in those hospitals, really bad. And they just can't afford to put more pressure on them. Football, you know, I thought it was touch and go as to whether they would cancel football matches as well. And but I think the reason they're not cancelling football matches is the amount of money involved, and also the fact that the injuries are likely to be much less severe and are not going to be, you know, you can't have a box, you know, 2 boxers have a brain injury and go to the hospital and there's nowhere to put them, and that's the problem. But I understand it from both sides.
Yeah, well, if you talk about the pressures, if let's say on one Saturday there's one boxing show and you'd have two paramedics team there, it's limited to 6, maximum 7 fights, 4 fighters. You know as well as I do, Steve. I mean, the number of times that you get a show with a boxer on the bleed. I think in 24 years for me, I've had it 3 times. So I understand what you're saying. If that happens, they've got to find a bed for them, haven't they? And I'm sure that they would do. But what I'm saying is, in football, if there's 20 games, there'll probably be, I don't know how many paramedics, ambulances they have. They might have 3 at each game, so there'd be 60. So there's a lot more pressure going on the NHS through the football than there would be.
The board, though, Steve, definitely had external pressures that applied to them about this, and I think a lot of the doctors were not prepared to go and do the events. I think you're going to find that to be the case as well, that the doctors were withdrawing their support for the shows on the basis of what I've just been telling you. So I don't think they were going to be able to get doctors and medics there anyway.
Yeah. Well, that surprises me then, because the 600 quid they pick up, they're scratching the doors to get in.
I know. I know. Right.
I did hear very similar to you two, not quite in that aggressive stance of external pressure, Steve, what the word you used, but I was told that the doctor, you know, they couldn't get doctors was the main reason. So
I think it was both, and that I understood that to be the case as well. And I think the doctors were told you're not, because most of the doctors that they take are employed by the NHS and have private practices. And I think
so where do the footballers get all the doctors from?
Yeah, but they get the same thing. But the doctors are the difference with football is they've taken a view that if somebody gets a bad injury in boxing, it could be a bad injury in boxing, and they don't want to take that risk. So I think with footballers, you know, also they probably got the money. They probably medical centres there. They're going to have things on hand, and they will have to go to hospitals, get their leg busted. But a boxing injury, and again, as you rightfully say, Steve, it hardly ever happens. The last injury, a serious injury to a boxer I had, was actually on one of your shows many years ago, and that was the last time that I experienced it. And you know, when it happens, it's bad. But when you are looking, it wouldn't be a good look if hospitals are overrun and you've got a boxing show with a boxer with a brain injury. And hospitals are turning away people, and then the boxer if he gets in, they're going to go, what's going on here? Why was that allowed to happen? Why have I not been treated for COVID? And this boxer's got in the hospital. So I think it does become a really difficult position. But in addition to that, I feel that there was enough pressure from the medical profession not to service boxing events, and I think that's where it came from. But with football, the amount of money in football, I'm afraid that you know and I know that when there's money, there's as things go on, and if we don't feel that there's potential corruption in the PPE deployment and stuff that has been going on, I know a few stories. When there's that sort of money talks, and I'm afraid that's how it works with football. Money talks, and they'll do it.
Yeah, you mentioned that football being a wash of money. A lot of the boxers you guys look after aren't a wash of money. Steve, I know you told most of yours to go and get a day job. Have any of them now turned around and said, that's it, they're not going to do it anymore?
I haven't had, no, to be honest, that hasn't happened. I've had more of them saying, when can I fight? When can I fight? Can you give me a date? I've had quite a bit of that. So I haven't had it yet, but I think it will happen naturally. I think when the longer it goes, when boxers' lives have moved on, I think there will be a hell of a lot that don't come back. A hell of a lot.
You, Woody, have you had anyone, Jack, yet?
No, and like I said before, the top boxers are normally quite well off financially, so not having to fight for 12 months isn't a big issue for them. And then the smaller kids who earn not a lot of money on our shows, they're used to struggling, and you know, if they are fighting on our shows, by the time they paid the shorts and the medicals, they've virtually gotten out anyway, so they're used to the struggles, and most of them have got other jobs to get by anyway, because they wouldn't get by in what they do with us. Ones that are lucky enough to have sponsors, and sponsors have kept them by, they've not had to get the job. But you know, it's hard for them, but they're used to having it hard. So I think the ones who fight, and I've always said it, I've said it to all the kids when they come and see me, there's better things to do than do professional boxing, and if it's in you, I'll help you and I'll work with you, and good luck to you. But you know, there's not many people who make a proper living out of boxing, so they're used to the hard times, and they've got something special inside them that makes them want to be a fighter, and that's something is there through these hard times as well.
Steve Goodwin, just one final question for you. Do you think in 12 months' time, this day in 12 months' time, I'll be going onto the Goodwin boxing website, and it's all laid out, your tickets and everything, and there'll be about 5 shows to buy tickets for. Confident they'll be going ahead full at your call as they usually are.
Yes. It's a matter of time, and it's how many people persevere until we get back to where we are. So it's just a matter of time. This will end up being just a virus that people accept exists, like every other illness that we have in the society. And by that time, it should happen. If not, I hope there's, if it's not, it'll be down to the government. But we do have to also accept that the risk is actually the distribution, but there is also the risk that the virus mutates into a different virus that is not treatable by current vaccines. If that happens, then we are pushed back. But yet, if nothing else happens in terms of we don't get a mutation that cannot be treated, then yes, I would expect definitely to be well back by then. But we still are at risk from other things happening outside of our control. And the reason I say me and Steve don't know is the things that can happen are totally outside our control. As you say, board cancelled this month. that was outside Eddie Hearn or Frank Warren's control. They cancelled it on them. So these things that can happen, we're just the pawns at the game at the end. And the boxers are the same. So we can't tell our boxers anything to be sure with. We can only talk about what's happening in the world. But it's very difficult. But yes, in 12 months' time, I'd be confident we will be back normal. I think we have, a very good chance of being back in some sort of normal by September.
What about you, Woody? Do you think yourself, you're end of this year, your jolly boys, you'll be, talking about it a week later, who got thrown out and who let themselves down?
Well, listen, it's got to happen. I can't have 2 years without the jolly boys. But no, I think this is like not just about boxing. It's life, isn't it? And if you'd have said in March when this started that you'll be opening in January and you still can't do shows, we'd have gone, no chance we'll be doing shows. So, we could be wrong. But I think if another 12 months goes round and we're not back to normality, it's not just like boxing that's going to be near the death. It's life, you know what I mean? Everybody's going to be struggling. So, they will get to a time where they've got to, even if there's problems, they've got to go to that herd community and say, look, get on with it, because otherwise we're all going to stay in and vegetate, and the businesses that we run as well as boxing, they're going to be in serious problems. They just can't let it go on like they are doing. And I understand what they're doing now, but there's got to be a line somewhere along it where we've got to let people live.
Then what you should do for your jolly boys next year is Manchester v London and get 3 or 4 of Steve boxers up there. They get some stick off your lot. They hate Londoners, everyone who goes to your show. There are typical blue collar mates. Get 4 kids up from London, Manchester v London, and let the Londoners win.
Yeah, we can imagine that. I'd have my licence took off me for that one, yeah.
Fellas, thanks very much indeed for joining us today on VIP TV. Enlightening as always, and we'll get you both on maybe the end of March and see where we are then. Steve, thanks and Happy New Year. And Woody, I've already seen you this year, so...
Yeah. All right, then, Steve, hopefully we can get a drink soon, mate. And I'll catch you soon, Steve Lillis.
Take care, both of you. See you soon.
Cheers, then. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
For all boxing, info, news and latest interviews, amateur and pro, across the north, click and subscribe. VIP Boxing Promotions. Also, Twitter, Instagram and Facebook.